The chapel smelled like lilies and lies. I stood there in my worn Sunday suit, staring at the polished oak coffin holding my boy. Darren. My son. The only thing in this world that ever made sense to me. Around me, people whispered their condolences, their words floating past like smoke. I couldn't hear them. Couldn't feel anything except the cold emptiness spreading through my chest. 41 years old. That's all he got. One drunk driver, one dark highway, and suddenly I'm burying the boy who used to hand me nails in my workshop, his small fingers sticky with sawdust and hope, and sat beside me in the front pew, dressed in black designer everything. My daughter-in-law. She hadn't cried once. Not at the hospital. Not this morning. Not now. Instead, she kept checking her phone, her face a perfect mask of practiced grief. Something about that bothered me more than I could name. The service ended. People filed out slowly, touching my shoulder, squeezing my hand. Empty gestures. What do you say to a 72-year-old man who just lost his only reason for living? Then Mr. Weston, Darren's lawyer, cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene at my office in an hour," he announced quietly. "For the reading of the will." I didn't care about any will. Didn't care about money or property or any of it. I just wanted my son back. And grabbed my elbow, her nails digging in through my jacket. "You're coming," she said. Not a question. A command. Something in her voice made my stomach twist. The lawyer's office was cold and sterile. Mahogany furniture, leather chairs, certificates on the walls. And sat across from me, flanked by her sister and some cousin I'd never met. Mr. Weston organized papers at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Then stood up. "Before we start," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the silence like glass, "there's something everyone needs to know." The room went still. Mr. Weston's hand paused over the documents. She turned to face me, her eyes hard and triumphant. "Gordon isn't Darren's real father." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The room tilted sideways. "Marianne told me years ago," and continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Darren's biological father was someone she had an affair with. So legally, Gordon has no right to anything here. Not the inheritance. Not the properties. Nothing." Gasps echoed around the table. Her sister's mouth fell open. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I sat frozen, my hands shaking in my lap. Marianne. My late wife. An affair? Was that true? Had I raised another man's child for 41 years? The questions pounded in my skull, each one more painful than the last. And crossed her arms, looking satisfied with herself. "I just thought everyone should know the truth before we discuss the will," she said, her tone sickeningly sweet. "Would you believe what happened next? Stay with me, because what this lawyer said is going to shock you just like it shocked her." Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Mr. Weston adjusted his glasses slowly. He didn't look surprised. Didn't look angry. He just looked tired. Like he'd been expecting this. "Mrs. Corbin," he said, his voice low and controlled, "that's quite an accusation. But before you humiliate yourself any further, perhaps you should allow me to finish reading the will." Anne's smile faltered. Just for a second. The lawyer opened the envelope with deliberate care, pulling out several documents. He glanced at me, and I swear I saw something like respect in his eyes. "I, Darren Hale, being of sound mind," he began reading, "do hereby leave the entirety of my estate, properties, and life insurance benefits to—" He paused, looking straight at Anne. Her face was already shifting, confidence cracking at the edges. What came next changed everything. Let me take you back to when things were simple, when life made sense. 36 years ago, I was a different man. Younger, stronger, with calloused hands and big dreams. I ran a small carpentry business out of a rented garage on the edge of Richmond. Nothing fancy. Just me, my tools, and the smell of fresh-cut pine. Then Marianne got pregnant. I remember the day she told me. We were sitting on the porch of our tiny rental house, and she just blurted it out. "I'm having a baby, Gordon." No build-up. No romance. Just fact. I was terrified. We barely had enough money for rent, let alone a child. But when I looked at her face, saw that mixture of fear and hope, something shifted in me. I decided right then that I'd build something bigger than myself. For them. Darren came into the world on a Tuesday morning in March. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. He had these tiny fists that gripped my finger like he was already trying to hold on to something. The nurse handed him to me, and I swear to God, I felt my entire life click into place. "You're mine now," I whispered to him. "I'm going to build you a good life, son." And I meant it. I worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week. Built decks, fixed roofs, constructed custom furniture for people who could actually afford it. Every dollar went into savings or diapers or formula. Marianne stayed home with the baby, and for a while, we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. Darren's first word was, "Duh." Not mama. Duh. He said it while I was hammering together a bookshelf in the garage, and I nearly dropped my tools. Marianne wasn't thrilled, but I was on top of the world. By the time he could walk, he followed me everywhere. The workshop became our kingdom. I'd give him scrap wood and a little hammer, and he'd help me build. His projects were disasters, of course. Crooked birdhouses and wobbly shelves. But I kept every single one. "Look, Dad," he'd shout, holding up some lopsided creation. "I made it myself." "That's real craftsmanship, son," I'd tell him, ruffling his hair. "You're a natural." Those were the good years. The years before Marianne started looking at our life like it was a cage. She began spending more time with her friends from the salon. Women who wore expensive jewelry and talked about vacations we couldn't afford. She'd come home late, smelling like wine and perfume that wasn't hers. When I asked where she'd been, she'd wave me off. "Just out with the girls, Gordon. Don't be so paranoid." But I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. I noticed the way she looked at our house, our furniture, our life. Like it wasn't enough. Like I wasn't enough. She stopped kissing me goodbye in the morning. Stopped asking about my day. Stopped caring. Still, I stayed. For Darren. He was 8 years old when he first helped me with a real project. A custom dining table for a client in the wealthy part of town. Darren measured, marked, and handed me tools like a seasoned assistant. When we delivered it, the client tipped us $50 extra and told Darren he was going places. "I'm going wherever Dad goes," Darren said proudly. That memory still breaks my heart. By the time he was 15, Darren could build damn near anything. Cabinets, chairs, porches. He had steady hands and a patient mind. I thought for sure he'd take over the business someday. We even talked about changing the name to Hale and Son Woodworks. "Dad," he said one afternoon, wiping sweat from his forehead, "I want to make you proud." "Son," I told him, gripping his shoulder, "you already do." But Marianne had different plans. She pushed him toward college. Engineering. "Something with a future," she'd say, glancing at my workshop with disdain. "He's too smart to end up like." She never finished that sentence, but I heard the rest. "Too smart to end up like you." Darren got accepted to Virginia Tech full scholarship. I was proud, even if it meant losing my apprentice. On the day he left, I helped him load boxes into his beat-up Honda. Marianne hovered nearby, dabbing her eyes dramatically. "Make something of yourself," she told him. He hugged me tight. "I'll come back and help you on weekends, Dad. Promise." He kept that promise for the first 2 years. Then he met her. And Corbin walked into our lives like a storm dressed in silk. Darren brought her home during his junior year, grinning like he'd won the lottery. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Dark hair, sharp features, designer clothes that probably cost more than my truck. "Mr. Hale," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Darren's told me so much about you." I shook her hand, feeling the coldness in her grip. She looked around our modest living room, her eyes sweeping over the homemade furniture, the worn carpet, the family photos on the wall. "It's cozy," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Very rustic. Rustic. Like we were a museum exhibit." Marianne loved her instantly. They bonded over wine and gossip, laughing about things I didn't understand. Meanwhile, Darren started talking differently. About bigger opportunities, better cities, a different kind of life. One night, he pulled me aside in the workshop. "Dad," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes, "and thinks I shouldn't take over the business. She says it's holding me back." Those words gutted me worse than any knife could. I forced a smile. "Son, you do what makes you happy." But inside, I was already losing him. The wedding happened 2 years later, and I barely recognized my own son. It was held at some country club outside Atlanta, the kind of place where they charge you $50 for a glass of champagne. 200 guests. Live band. Ice sculptures. The whole thing felt like a Broadway production, and I was just an extra in someone else's show. I wore my only suit, the same one I'd worn to my own father's funeral. It was outdated and didn't quite fit anymore, but it was clean. Anne's side of the family wore designer everything. Her father, a corporate lawyer, looked at me like I was the help. Marianne walked around like she belonged there, laughing with Anne's mother about vacation homes and stock portfolios. She'd lost weight, got her hair done professionally, wore a dress that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She didn't even acknowledge me during the reception. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I guess, if you like that kind of thing. Too much fuss, too many flowers, too many photographers. But when Darren stood at that altar, waiting for and to walk down the aisle, he looked happy. And that's all I cared about. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant said. They kissed, and everyone applauded. I clapped along, feeling like an outsider at my own son's wedding. At the reception, I sat at a table near the back with some of Darren's old friends from high school. Good kids. They asked about the business, about Darren's childhood, about the furniture I'd built. It was the only time all day I felt like myself. And made her rounds, greeting guests with that practiced smile. When she got to our table, she barely glanced my way. "Gordon," she said coolly, "thank you for coming." Like I was a distant acquaintance, not the groom's father. Darren found me later, loosening his tie, his face flushed from dancing. "Dad," he said, pulling up a chair, "sorry it's been crazy today. You having a good time?" "Best day of your life, son," I said, clapping his back. "That's all that matters." He studied my face for a moment, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or doubt. And can be a lot, he admitted quietly. "But she loves me. And I love her." "Then that's enough," I told him, even though my gut was screaming otherwise. After the wedding, they moved to Atlanta. And had connections there. Her father had lined up a job for Darren at some big engineering firm. The kind of place with glass buildings and business cards. He called me once a week at first, telling me about his projects, his new apartment, his life. But the calls got shorter, less frequent, more distant. "Things are just busy, Dad," he'd say apologetically. "I'll visit soon. Promise." 6 months passed before I saw him again. He drove up one Saturday afternoon with Anne, who stayed in the car scrolling through her phone while Darren came into the workshop. "Place looks the same," he said, smiling. "Nothing changes here," I replied. "How's the big city treating you?" "Good. Really good." But he didn't sound convinced. We talked for maybe 30 minutes before and honked the horn. "I gotta go," Darren said, hugging me quickly. "We've got dinner reservations." He was gone before I could tell him I missed him. The distance grew wider after that. A year became 2, then 3. Visits turned into holiday obligations. Phone calls became text messages. And every time I did see him and was there, controlling the conversation, deciding when it was time to leave. She had this way of making me feel small without saying anything directly. Little comments. Backhanded compliments. Silent judgments. One Thanksgiving, they came to my house for dinner. I'd spent 2 days preparing everything. Turkey, stuffing, homemade rolls. Set the table with Marianne's old china, the good stuff we only used on special occasions. And walked in, looked around, and said, "Oh, you cooked? How sweet." Sweet. Like I was a child playing house. Marianne had passed by then, and it was just the 3 of us. Darren tried to keep the peace, asking about the business, complimenting the food. And picked at her plate like she was afraid of catching something. Halfway through the meal, her phone rang. "I have to take this," she said, standing abruptly. She spent the next hour in the other room, laughing loudly about God knows what. Darren apologized quietly. "She's under a lot of stress at work." "It's fine," I lied. But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine anymore. The last time I saw my son before the accident, we met for lunch at a diner halfway between Richmond and Atlanta. He'd called me out of the blue, said he needed to talk. He looked tired. Older than 39. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Dad," he said, stirring his coffee absently, "do you ever regret the choices you made?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you ever wish you'd done something different? Been someone different?" I thought about it carefully. "No, son. I built a good life. Maybe not a rich one, but a good one. I got to raise you. That's all I ever wanted." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Yeah, that's what I thought." We finished lunch, and he hugged me tighter than usual before leaving. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, son." 3 weeks later, I got the call. Highway accident. Drunk driver. Darren was gone. And now, sitting in this lawyer's office, listening to and try to erase me from his life completely, I realized she'd been trying to do that all along. But what Mr. Weston said next proved that my son never forgot who his real father was. After the wedding, the distance between us became a canyon. Darren stopped calling every week. Then every month. Eventually, I'd be the one reaching out, leaving voicemails that went unreturned for days. When he finally called back, the conversations were rushed, distracted. "Sorry, Dad, work's crazy right now." "Sorry, Dad, Anne's family is in town." "Sorry, Dad, we've got plans this weekend." Always sorry. Never available. I tried not to take it personally. Young married couples need space, right? They need to build their own life. That's what I told myself. But the truth gnawed at me late at night when I sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by projects we used to build together. Anne's influence seeped into everything. She convinced Darren to sell his old truck and buy a BMW. Convinced him to join her country club. Convinced him that success meant expensive suits and wine tastings and charity galas where nobody actually cared about charity. I watched my son disappear into her world, piece by piece. The holidays got worse. That first Thanksgiving at their place in Atlanta, I drove 3 hours with a homemade pecan pie on my passenger seat. I'd called ahead, confirmed the time, even asked if I should bring anything else. When I arrived, the house was stunning. 3 stories, modern architecture, a fountain in the front yard. I felt out of place before I even knocked, and answered the door in a silk dress, holding a glass of white wine. "Gordon," she said, her smile thin. "You're here. Not welcome or come in. Just, you're here." Inside, the dining room was set for 12 people. Anne's parents, her sister, her cousins, a few of their friends. Everyone dressed like they were attending a fashion show. I stood there in my khakis and button-down shirt, feeling like a janitor at a ballroom. "Darren's in the kitchen," Anne said dismissively, already turning away. I found him pulling a turkey out of the oven, his face flushed. "Dad." He grinned, genuine warmth in his eyes. "You made it." We hugged, and for a moment, it felt like old times. "Need help?" I asked. "Nah, I got it. Just go sit down. We'll eat in a few minutes." I walked back to the dining room. The table was gorgeous. Crystal glasses, fine china, cloth napkins folded into swans. I looked for my name card. There wasn't one. I checked again. Anne's parents at the head. Her sister and brother-in-law to the right. Friends filling the sides. Darren and Anne at the other end. "No spot for me." Anne," I said quietly. "Where should I sit?" She glanced over, feigning surprise. "Oh, I completely forgot to add a chair. The table's full." She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "There's a stool in there if you want to eat at the counter." My face burned. 12 people at the table, and I was eating on a stool in the kitchen like the family dog. Darren came out carrying the turkey. He saw me standing there, saw the full table, and his smile faltered. "Wait, where's Dad sitting?" "There wasn't enough room," Anne said breezily. "He said he doesn't mind the kitchen." I hadn't said that. But I also didn't correct her. "Dad, no, come on," Darren started. "It's fine, son," I interrupted, forcing a smile. "You focus on your guests. I'll be right here." I ate alone in that kitchen, listening to laughter and conversation from the next room. Listening to and tell stories about their trips to Europe. Listening to her father brag about his latest case. Listening to everyone toast to family while I sat invisible 10 feet away. Darren found me afterward, his face tight with guilt. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "She's just trying to fit everyone in." "She should have made room for you first," he said quietly. "You're my father." But he didn't push it. Didn't insist. Just apologized and let it go. That became the pattern. And would do something hurtful, Darren would apologize, and nothing ever changed. Christmas that year, they didn't come visit. Too much traffic, Anne said. Easter, they had plans with her family. My birthday, they sent a card. Not even a call. I threw myself into work to avoid thinking about it. Took on bigger projects. Built custom furniture for wealthy clients who treated me better than my own daughter-in-law. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then one evening, my phone rang. Darren's name lit up the screen. "Hey, son," I answered, surprised. "Everything okay?" Yeah. Just wanted to hear your voice." Something in his tone worried me. "You sure?" And I had a fight," he admitted. "About money. About priorities. About a lot of things." "Marriage is hard," I offered. "Your mother and I fought plenty." "Did you ever feel like you were losing yourself?" he asked quietly. Like you were becoming someone you didn't recognize? My heart broke a little. Son, if you're unhappy. I'm not unhappy, he said quickly. Too quickly. Just adjusting. That's all. We talked for another hour. About nothing and everything. It felt like old times, like when he was a teenager and we'd sit on the porch after a long day, just talking. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Always. That was one of our last real conversations. Months passed. Darren got promoted at work, which meant even less free time. Anne's demands grew. They bought a bigger house, joined more clubs, attended more events. Every time I saw pictures on social media, Darren looked more tired, more worn down. But he smiled for the cameras. And beamed beside him, victorious. I started having this recurring dream. Darren as a little boy, standing in my workshop, holding a hammer too big for his hands. Dad, he'd say, I can't find my way home. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. The last time I visited them was 3 months before the accident. I drove to Atlanta unannounced because Darren had mentioned he'd be home that weekend and had plans with her friends. When I knocked, Darren answered, surprised but happy. Dad, what are you doing here? Thought I'd surprise you, I said. Maybe we could grab lunch? Just us. His face lit up. Yeah, let me grab my keys. We went to a barbecue place he loved, sat outside on picnic benches, and talked like we used to. He asked about the business, about my health, about everything except his own life. But I noticed things. The way he checked his phone constantly. The way his leg bounced anxiously. The way he seemed scared to relax. Son, I finally said, are you okay? He stopped mid-bite, staring at his pulled pork sandwich. Do you think DNA matters? He asked suddenly. The question threw me. What? DNA. Blood. Do you think that's what makes someone family? No, I said firmly. Love makes family. Showing up makes family. He nodded slowly. That's what I think too. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone rang, and his expression shifted instantly, from relaxed to tense. Hey, babe. Yeah, I'm just... okay. Yeah. I'll be home soon. He hung up and stood. I gotta go, Dad. Anne's back early. We drove back to his house in silence. When I dropped him off, he hugged me tight. You're the best man I know, he whispered. Don't ever forget that. I watched him walk inside, and something told me that was goodbye. 3 months later, I got the call. The drunk driver who hit him died on impact. Darren died 2 hours later in the hospital, and was listed as his emergency contact. Not me. I found out from a nurse who asked if I was next of kin. I'm his father, I'd said. According to our records, his wife is listed as... I'm his father, I repeated, my voice breaking. They let me see him. His body was broken, but his face looked peaceful, like he was finally free of something. I held his hand and cried harder than I'd cried in my entire life. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Now, sitting in this lawyer's office, listening to and claim I had no right to be called his father, I felt that rage and grief collide. But Mr. Weston wasn't finished speaking. And what he said next would destroy Anne's lies completely. Mr. Weston adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him. I, Darren Hale, being of sound mind, he read aloud, his voice steady and deliberate, do hereby leave the entirety of my estate, properties, and life insurance benefits to... The room held its breath, and leaned forward, her mouth curved in a satisfied smirk. She was already imagining dollar signs, I could see it in her eyes. The lawyer paused, lifting his gaze to meet Anne's directly. To my father, Gordon Hale. The silence that followed was deafening. Anne's smile vanished like someone had slapped it off her face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? Everything, Mr. Weston continued calmly, including the house in Atlanta, the investment accounts, the life insurance payout, and all business holdings. All to Gordon Hale. That's impossible. And shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. He's not even, I just told you. He's not Darren's biological father. This will is invalid. Mr. Weston didn't flinch. He simply pulled another document from his folder and placed it on the table with deliberate care. Mrs. Corbin, he said, his tone cool and measured. Your husband was fully aware of the paternity questions. In fact, he came to my office approximately 1 month before his death with concerns. Not because of you, but because of a confession his mother made before she passed. My heart stopped. Marianne. She told Darren? He requested a DNA test, Mr. Weston continued. He wanted certainty, not because he doubted his father's love, but because he wanted to protect Gordon from exactly this kind of accusation. Anne's face went pale. You're lying. The lawyer slid the document across the table. The results came back 2 weeks before the accident. Gordon Hale is, genetically and legally, Darren's biological father. The room erupted in murmurs. Anne's sister gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I couldn't process what I was hearing. My hands shook violently. Tears blurred my vision. That's not possible," Anne stammered. Marianne told me. Marianne lied, Mr. Weston said simply. According to Darren, his mother was manipulative and ashamed of her life. She fabricated the affair story, possibly out of resentment or some misguided attempt at control. But the science is clear. He turned to me, and his expression softened. Mr. Hale, your son wanted me to tell you something personally. He said, and I quote, "She always underestimated my dad. But I want to make sure the man who built me gets what's rightfully his." I broke. Tears poured down my face, and I didn't care who saw. My son. My beautiful, brilliant son. Even after everything, even after Anne tried to poison his mind, he never stopped knowing who his real father was. And stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and rage. This is insane. I'm his wife. I'm entitled. You're entitled to nothing, Mr. Weston interrupted coldly. Your husband made his wishes explicitly clear. In fact, there's more. He pulled out yet another sheet of paper. Darren left specific instructions regarding you, Mrs. Corbin. He wrote, "My wife has shown me who she truly is. Her greed and manipulation have opened my eyes. I leave her nothing but the hope that she learns what real love looks like." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Anne's hands clenched into fists. He wouldn't. He loved me. He loved the woman he thought you were, Mr. Weston said quietly. But people reveal themselves eventually. Anne's sister stood up, grabbing her purse. "And we should go." "No," Anne screamed, slamming her hands on the table. "This is fraud. I'll contest this. I'll sue." Mr. Weston remained calm. "You're welcome to try, Mrs. Corbin. But the will is ironclad, witnessed by 3 independent parties, and supported by DNA evidence. You won't win." She stared at him, at me, at everyone in the room. Her face was red, twisted with fury and humiliation. Finally, she grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back to me, her voice venomous. "You took everything from me." I met her eyes, tears still streaming down my face. "No," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself." She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. After she left, the room slowly emptied. Anne's family slipped out quietly, embarrassed. Mr. Weston gathered his papers, giving me space to process. When we were alone, he handed me a sealed envelope. "Your son left this for you," he said gently. "He asked that you read it in private." My hands trembled as I took it. Darren's handwriting across the front. "Dad." Mr. Weston squeezed my shoulder. "He loved you very much, Mr. Hale. That was clear every time he spoke about you." After he left, I sat alone in that conference room, holding the letter like it was made of glass. Outside, I could hear Anne's raised voice in the parking lot, yelling at someone on the phone. Probably a lawyer, already trying to find a way to fight this. But I didn't care about her anymore. I carefully opened the envelope, my heart pounding. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten, his words slightly rushed but clear. "Dad," it began. And I started reading. What my son wrote in that letter would change everything I thought I knew about the last years of his life. The letter trembled in my hands as I unfolded it, Darren's familiar handwriting blurring through my tears. "Dad," it began. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. And knowing Anne, she's already tried to destroy you. I'm sorry I couldn't stop her while I was alive. But maybe I can protect you now." My chest tightened. He knew. He'd known what she was planning. "3 years ago, Mom called me drunk," he continued. "She was crying, rambling about mistakes and lies. She told me you weren't my real father. That she'd had an affair with some guy from the country club back in the 80s. She said she'd kept it secret all these years because she was ashamed." I closed my eyes, remembering Marianne's drinking, her bitterness toward the end of her life. The cancer had taken her body, but something darker had taken her spirit long before that. "I was devastated, Dad. Not because of the DNA, but because I couldn't imagine you not being my father. You were the only constant in my entire life. The only person who never asked me to be someone I wasn't." My hands shook harder. I had to set the letter down for a moment, pressing my palms against the table to steady myself. "And found out somehow. Mom must have told her during one of their wine nights. And Anne. She stored that information like a weapon, waiting for the right moment to use it. Of course she did. And had always been calculating, always 3 steps ahead in her own twisted game. But here's the thing, Dad. I never believed Mom. She lied about so many things over the years. Rewrote history to make herself look better. So I went to Mr. Weston and asked him to arrange a DNA test. I didn't tell anyone. Not Anne. Not Mom's family. Just me and the lawyer." I picked up the letter again, my vision clearing slightly. When the results came back, I cried. Not because I was surprised, but because I was relieved. "You are my father. Biologically, legally, every way that matters. Mom lied, Dad. I don't know why. Maybe she wanted to hurt you even from the grave. Maybe she was just so miserable she needed to make someone else feel small." A sob escaped my throat. "Marianne. Even dead, she'd tried to take Darren from me. I never told you because I didn't want you to carry that pain. I wanted to protect you from her cruelty. But I also knew and would eventually use this lie to try and take everything. So I changed my will immediately. Smart boy. My smart, thoughtful boy. Every dollar, every property, every investment goes to you. Because you earned it, Dad. Not with money or status or connections. You earned it by showing up. By teaching me how to measure twice and cut once. By sitting with me in the workshop when I was scared about school. By never making me feel like I had to be perfect." Tears dripped onto the paper, smudging his words slightly. "And doesn't understand that kind of love. She thinks everything has a price tag. She married me because I had potential to make money, not because she loved who I was. I realized that too late. My heart broke for him. He'd known he was trapped, and I hadn't seen it. The last few years have been hard, Dad, and controlled everything. Where we lived, who we saw, how we spent money. She hated when I visited you because she couldn't stand that someone else had influence over me. She tried to make me ashamed of you, of where I came from. But I never was. I could barely see the words now through my tears. I wish I'd been braver. I wish I'd stood up to her more. I wish I'd come home and worked with you like we'd always planned. But I got caught in her world, and by the time I realized how lost I was, I didn't know how to get out. No, son. No. You were brave. You were perfect. So this is my last gift to you. Financial security. Proof that you are my father in every sense of the word. And a final message too, and that love doesn't have a price tag. The letter continued for another page, memories of our time together. The fishing trips. The late nights in the workshop. The bad jokes and terrible coffee. He remembered everything. Every small moment I thought he'd forgotten. Thank you for building me, Dad. Not just furniture and houses, but character. Thank you for showing me what a real man looks like. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough. The letter ended with, I love you. Always have. Always will. Your son, Darren. I sat there in that empty conference room and wept like a child. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. My son had known he was loved. He'd known where he came from. And he'd made sure Anne's poison couldn't touch that truth. Outside, I heard a car engine start aggressively, tires squealing as Anne left the parking lot. Running from her humiliation. Running from the consequences of her cruelty. Mr. Weston appeared in the doorway quietly. Are you all right, Mr. Hale? I wiped my face with my sleeve. He knew everything. He did, the lawyer said gently. He was very specific about making sure you were protected. He came to my office 4 times in the last month of his life, making sure every detail was correct. Did he know? I asked hoarsely. Did he know something was going to happen? Mr. Weston hesitated. I don't think so. But he talked about you constantly. About legacy. About making sure the right people were taken care of. He seemed at peace. Like he'd made important decisions. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my chest. What happens now? I asked. Now. Mr. Weston pulled out another folder. Now we transfer everything into your name. The house, the accounts, the investments. It'll take a few weeks to process everything, but it's all yours. Approximately $2.3 million in total assets. The number meant nothing to me. It was just paper. Numbers in accounts. None of it would bring my boy back. But it was his final way of saying, I love you, Dad. You matter. You've always mattered. Mr. Weston handed me the folder. There's one more thing. Darren left instructions for a trust fund. He wanted money set aside for a specific purpose, but he left the details up to you. He said, and I'm quoting here, Dad will know what to do with it. He'll build something that lasts. I looked at the folder, then at the letter, then at the lawyer. He always trusted me to build things right, I whispered. He did, Mr. Weston agreed. And he was right too. I left the office that afternoon with documents I didn't fully understand and a heart that felt both shattered and somehow whole. The parking lot was empty except for my old truck. Anne's BMW was long gone. I drove home slowly, the letter on the passenger seat beside me. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same. Modest. Weathered. Built by my own hands 40 years ago. But everything felt different now. I walked into the workshop, flipping on the lights. Tools hung on the walls, organized exactly as Darren had left them the last time he'd visited. I ran my hand over the workbench, feeling the grooves and scratches of decades of projects. "I won't let you down, son," I said aloud to the empty room. "I'll build something that matters." But first, I had to face what and would do next. Because women like her don't accept defeat quietly. 3 days after the will reading, Anne's lawyer sent me a letter. I was in the workshop, trying to stay busy, trying not to drown in grief. The envelope was thick, expensive paper, delivered by courier. My hands left sawdust prints on the crisp white surface as I opened it. "Notice of intent to contest" will blazed across the top in bold letters. She was actually doing it. Despite the DNA test. Despite Darren's clear wishes. Despite everything. And was trying to fight. The letter claimed undue influence, suggesting Darren had been manipulated into changing his will. It claimed I'd isolated him from his wife. It claimed the DNA test was fabricated. Every sentence dripped with desperation disguised as legal authority. I called Mr. Weston. "I got a letter," I said, my voice steady despite the anger rising in my chest. "So did I," he replied calmly. "Mrs. Corbin hired Gerald Fitzhugh. He's expensive and aggressive, but he's working with nothing. Let me handle this, Gordon. Focus on healing." But I couldn't just sit still. That night, I pulled out boxes from the attic. Old photos, letters, report cards, everything I'd saved from Darren's childhood. Evidence of a father who'd been present, who'd shown up, who'd never missed a single important moment. School plays where I sat front row. Science fairs where I helped build volcanoes. Baseball games where I coached Little League. Birthday parties. Christmases. Ordinary Tuesdays. I had proof of 30 years of fatherhood. And had expensive lawyers and lies. 2 weeks later, we were in court for the preliminary hearing. I wore my best suit, which still wasn't much, and showed up in designer black, playing the grieving widow. Her lawyer, a silver-haired man in a suit that probably cost more than my truck, argued passionately about suspicious circumstances. But Mr. Weston was ready. He presented the DNA test results. 3 independent witnesses to the will signing. Darren's handwritten notes about his wishes. Emails between Darren and the lawyer discussing the changes months before the accident. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened carefully. When Fitzhugh finished his theatrical presentation, she looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Fitzhugh, you're asking this court to overturn a man's explicit wishes based on what, exactly? Your client's hurt feelings." "Your Honor, there are questions about." "Questions you can't answer," she interrupted. "The DNA test is legitimate. The will is properly executed. And frankly, Mr. Hale's presence in his son's life is well documented. Motion to contest is denied." The gavel came down with finality. Anne's face went white, then red. She started to protest, but Fitzhugh grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Outside the courtroom, she waited by my truck. Her designer clothes looked out of place in the public parking lot. Her makeup was smeared, her hair less perfect than usual. "This isn't over," she hissed. "It is," I said quietly. "Your husband made his choice. You need to accept it. He was confused. Manipulated. You poisoned him against me." I looked at her, really looked at her. Behind the anger, I saw something else. Fear. Desperation. The sudden realization that she'd lost everything she'd spent years building. "I never said a bad word about you to Darren," I told her honestly. "I didn't have to. You showed him who you were all by yourself." Her hand flew up, and for a second I thought she might actually slap me. But she stopped, her arm trembling in the air between us. "I loved him," she whispered, and for the first time, she sounded almost human. No, I said gently. You loved what he could give you. That's not the same thing. She dropped her hand, tears streaming down her face. I have nothing now. He left me nothing. You have your health, your education, your family. That's more than a lot of people have. It's not enough, she sobbed. It never would have been, I said. That was always your problem. I got in my truck and drove away, watching her shrink in my rearview mirror. A small, broken figure in an empty parking lot. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. That night, back in the workshop, I stared at Darren's letter again. The part where he talked about building something that matters. About using his legacy for something bigger than revenge or money. An idea started forming in my mind. The next morning, I called Mr. Weston. That trust fund Darren set up. How much flexibility do I have with it? Complete flexibility, the lawyer said. He left the entire decision to you. What are you thinking? I want to start a foundation, I said. For kids who need fathers. Kids whose dads walked away or never showed up or died too soon. I want to teach them carpentry, give them skills, give them a place where someone shows up for them. There was silence on the other end. Then, Gordon, that's beautiful. Darren would have loved that. Call it the Hale Foundation, I said. Make sure his name lives on doing something good. Over the next month, I worked with lawyers and accountants I never thought I'd need. We purchased a building on the edge of town, an old warehouse with good bones. I spent weeks renovating it myself, building workbenches, organizing tools, creating a space where kids could learn and grow. And tried one more time to fight, filing another motion. It was dismissed immediately. Her lawyer stopped returning her calls. She ran out of money and options. I heard through the grapevine she'd moved back to Atlanta, living with her parents, working some administrative job. The country club life was over. The designer clothes and expensive cars, gone. Part of me felt sorry for her. But mostly, I felt free. 3 months after Darren's death, the Hale Foundation opened its doors. 15 kids showed up that first day. Boys aged 10 to 17, most from single-parent homes or foster care. Kids who needed someone to believe in them. I taught them how to measure, how to cut, how to build something from nothing. And while we worked, we talked. About life. About pain. About what it means to be a man. Mr. Hale, one kid asked me, a 13-year-old named Marcus, did your dad teach you this stuff? He did, I said. And my son helped me remember why it matters. Where's your son now? I paused, my hand resting on the workbench. He's gone. But everything we built together, it's still here. In this building. In what I'm teaching you. That's how love works. It keeps building, even after someone's gone. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding more than his years should have allowed. That night, I sat alone in the workshop at the foundation, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of fresh sawdust. Darren's letter was framed on the wall now, where I could see it every day. We did it, son, I whispered. We built something that'll last. But there was still one more thing I needed to do before I could truly let go. 6 months after Darren's death, I received an unexpected letter. Not from lawyers this time. From Anne. The envelope was plain, her handwriting shaky. I almost threw it away without opening it. But something made me pause. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the hope that she'd finally found some peace. I sat on my porch with coffee growing cold beside me and carefully opened the envelope. Gordon, it began. No, Mr. Hale. No formality. Just my name. I don't expect you to read this. I don't deserve your time or attention. But I need to write it anyway, even if you burn it immediately. I kept reading. I've spent the last 6 months losing everything. My house, my friends, my reputation. And Corbin, the woman everyone envied, is gone. I'm living with my parents, working a job I would have mocked a year ago, driving a 10-year-old sedan. There was a coffee stain on the paper, or maybe a tear stain. Hard to tell. At first, I blamed you. I blamed Darren. I blamed the universe for being unfair. But late at night, when I'm alone in my childhood bedroom, I can't hide from the truth anymore. I did this to myself. I sipped my cold coffee, surprised by the honesty. Darren tried to tell me. So many times. He'd say, "And why can't we just be happy with what we have?" And I'd roll my eyes, thinking he lacked ambition. But he didn't lack ambition. He lacked greed. There's a difference I'm only now learning. The letter went on for 3 pages. She described moments I hadn't known about. Times Darren had defended me when her friends mocked my blue-collar background. Times he'd refused to let her badmouth me. Times he'd driven hours just to have lunch with me, despite her complaints. He loved you so much, Gordon. More than he loved me, if I'm being honest. And I hated you for it. I hated that a carpenter in a small workshop had more influence over my husband than I did with all my planning and manipulation. Her words were raw, painful, real in a way she'd never been before. I wanted to destroy you at the funeral because I knew the truth. Darren had chosen you over me in every way that mattered. That will was just the final proof. And I couldn't accept that someone like you, someone I'd looked down on, had won. I set the letter down, looking out at the street. A neighbor waved. Life continuing as normal while I processed Anne's confession. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. Real wealth isn't money or status. It's being loved by someone like Darren. And you had that. You always had that. While I had nothing but ambition and resentment. The letter ended simply, "I'm sorry. For everything, Anne." I folded it carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. Part of me wanted to be angry, to reject her apology as too little, too late. But anger felt exhausting. And Darren wouldn't have wanted me to carry that weight. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery for the first time since the funeral. Darren's headstone was simple granite, exactly what he would have wanted. Darren Michael Hale, beloved son, builder of good things. I'd chosen those words myself. I sat on the grass beside his grave, my old bones protesting the movement. "Got a letter from Anne," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard. "She's finally figured some things out. Too late to fix anything, but maybe it's enough that she understands." The wind rustled through the trees overhead. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. "I'm not angry anymore, son. At her. At your mother. At any of it. Life's too short for that poison. You taught me that, even if you didn't mean to." I pulled some weeds growing near the headstone, tidying up the area. "The foundation's doing good. Really good. We've got 30 kids now. Some of them remind me of you. Smart. Curious. Good hearts hiding behind tough exteriors. I'm teaching them what you taught me, what we built together." A tear slipped down my cheek, but I was smiling. "I miss you every single day. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm building again. That's what we do, right? We build. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts." I stayed there for an hour, talking to my son like he could hear me. Telling him about the kids at the foundation. About the projects we were working on. About the quiet peace I was slowly finding. Before I left, I placed my hand on the headstone. "Thank you for choosing me, son. Thank you for the DNA test. Thank you for the will. But mostly, thank you for 39 years of being exactly who you were. I'm proud to be your father. Always was. Always will be. Driving home, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone at a red light and called Mr. Weston. I want to write a letter to and, I said. Nothing legal. Just person to person. Can you make sure she gets it? Of course, Gordon. What are you going to say? I thought about it for a moment. The truth. That I forgive her. That Darren would have wanted that. That we both lost him, and maybe that's punishment enough. There was silence then. You're a good man, Gordon Hale. I'm just tired of carrying hatred, I said. Life's too short. My boy taught me that. That night, I wrote the letter by hand, sitting at Darren's old desk that was now in my home office. I kept it simple. 5 sentences. And, I got your letter. I forgive you. Darren would have forgiven you too. We both lost him, and that's tragedy enough. I hope you find peace. Gordon. I mailed it the next morning. 2 weeks later, I got a single text from an unknown number. Thank you. Truly. I never heard from her again. A year after Darren's death, the foundation hosted its first graduation. 12 boys completed the program, each one building their own project from scratch. Chairs, tables, bookshelves. Simple things. But built with their own hands and hearts. I stood in front of them, these kids who'd come from broken homes and hard lives, and I saw my son in every face. You built something today, I told them. Something real that'll last. But more importantly, you proved you can build your own future. One choice at a time. One nail at a time. Marcus, now 14 and nearly as tall as me, raised his hand. Mr. Hale, will you keep teaching us? Even after we graduate? I smiled, my eyes wet. Son, my door is always open. For as long as you need it. They gathered around for a group photo, these boys who'd learned that fatherhood isn't about blood. It's about showing up. About teaching. About building something that lasts. And somewhere, I believed Darren was watching. Proud of what we'd built together. Proud of what his death had created. Because sometimes the strongest foundations are built from broken hearts. The years that followed taught me something I hadn't expected. Grief doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget Darren was gone. I'd reach for my phone to call him before reality crashed back in. Other days, I'd see a young man walk past with his father, and the ache would hit so hard I couldn't breathe. But the foundation kept me moving forward. By the 3rd year, we'd expanded to serve 50 kids. Some came for carpentry. Others just needed a place to belong. We hired 2 part-time instructors, men who understood what these boys needed because they'd been these boys once. Tommy, one of our first graduates, came back as a volunteer at 18. He'd gone through the system, bounced between foster homes, angry at the world. Now he was helping younger kids sand down rough edges, both in wood and in themselves. Mr. Hale taught me something, Tommy told a new group of boys one afternoon. He taught me that broken things can be fixed. That you can build something beautiful from scraps. And he didn't just mean furniture. I listened from the doorway, pride swelling in my chest. This is what Darren had wanted. This is what we built together. But there were still hard days. I visited Darren's grave every Sunday morning. Rain or shine. I'd bring coffee in a thermos, sit on a folding chair I kept in my truck, and talk to him like he was right there beside me. Foundation's doing good, son, I'd say. We've got a kid named Jamal who reminds me of you. Quiet. Thoughtful. Measures everything 3 times before cutting. You would have liked him. The grass would blow in the wind. Birds would sing overhead. And I'd feel just for a moment, like Darren could hear me. One Sunday, I found fresh flowers on his grave. Not from me. Not from anyone I knew. A simple bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grow along roadsides. There was a note tucked underneath. Thank you for teaching my dad carpentry. He's working construction now. We have enough food. Tommy. I sat down hard on the grass, the note shaking in my hands. The ripples were spreading. Darren's legacy wasn't just the foundation. It was the lives being changed. The families being fed. The futures being built. You did this, son, I whispered. This is all you. 5 years after his death, I got a call from a reporter. She'd heard about the foundation, wanted to do a story about it for the local news. I'd rather not, I said immediately. This isn't about me getting attention. Mr. Hale, she pressed gently, your story could inspire people to donate, to volunteer, to start similar programs in other cities. Don't you think that's worth a little discomfort? She had a point. Darren would have wanted the foundation to grow, to help more kids. I agreed to the interview. The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer, came to the workshop on a Saturday when it was full of kids working on projects. She watched for an hour before asking a single question. Finally, she said, "Why do you do this?" I looked at Marcus, now 17 and helping a younger boy with measurements. At Tommy, guiding another kid through using a table saw safely. At all these boys who'd walked in broken and were slowly building themselves back up. My son taught me that love isn't just about the people right in front of you, I said. It's about building something that outlasts you. Something that keeps giving even after you're gone. The story aired 3 weeks later. 6 minutes of footage showing the workshop, the kids, and me talking about Darren. They used the photo I kept on my desk, him at 15 with sawdust in his hair, grinning at the camera. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from people I'd never met. Volunteers called asking how they could help. 3 other cities reached out wanting advice on starting their own programs. The foundation that had been Darren's final gift was growing beyond anything I'd imagined. But success brought unexpected complications. One afternoon, a black Mercedes pulled up outside the workshop. Expensive. New. Completely out of place in our neighborhood. The door opened, and Ann stepped out. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. She looked different. Older, yes, but softer somehow. Less sharp around the edges. She wore simple clothes, minimal makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a basic ponytail. She stood by her car for a long moment, staring at the building. At the sign that read, Hale Foundation for Fatherless Kids. At the boys visible through the windows, working on their projects. Then she saw me standing in the doorway. We looked at each other across the parking lot. 5 years of silence between us. 5 years of separate healing. She walked over slowly, hands shoved in her pockets. "Gordon," she said quietly. "Ann, I saw the news story. About what you built here." She glanced at the building again. It's beautiful. Want to come inside?" I asked, surprising myself. She looked shocked. "You'd let me. Darren would have wanted you to see it." We walked through the workshop together. The boys paid us no attention, focused on their projects. And watched them work, her expression unreadable. "He always wanted to teach," she said softly. "Did you know that? Before he became an engineer. He wanted to be a shop teacher." "I didn't know that. It hurt to learn it now. I talked him out of it," she continued. "Said there was no money in teaching. No prestige. I convinced him engineering was smarter." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid." "We all make mistakes," I said. "Not like mine." She turned to face me. I've spent 5 years trying to become someone Darren wouldn't be ashamed of. I volunteer at a homeless shelter. I mentor young women who are where I was. Shallow. Materialistic. Headed for disaster. That's good, and, really, I'll never forgive myself for what I did to you. To his memory. But I wanted you to know I'm trying. Trying to be someone he could have loved. Her voice cracked on the last word. I put my hand on her shoulder, a gesture I never thought I'd make. He did love you, Anne. Maybe not the way you needed. But he tried. She wiped her eyes quickly. Can I ask you something? Do you think he'd be proud of this? The foundation. I looked around the workshop. At the boys building, learning, growing. At the walls covered in photos of graduates. At the legacy my son had created through his final act of love. Yeah, I said. I think he'd be real proud. And nodded, composing herself. Thank you for letting me see it. I'll go now. Anne, I called as she reached the door. She turned back. Take care of yourself. She smiled, a real smile this time. You too, Gordon. I watched her drive away, and something heavy lifted from my shoulders. Forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past poison your future. That night, back at Darren's grave, I told him about Anne's visit. She's trying, son. Might be too late for her and you, but she's trying. I think you'd appreciate that. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Beautiful and sad at the same time. Like most things in life. I'm getting old, I admitted to the headstone. 78 now. Hands shake more. Knees don't work like they used to. But I'm not done yet. Not until every kid who needs someone to show up for them gets that chance. I stood slowly, my joints protesting. Thank you for my life, son. For giving me purpose even after you left. Some fathers leave their kids an inheritance. You left me a reason to keep breathing. Walking back to my truck, I realized something profound. Darren hadn't just given me money or property. He'd given me the greatest gift a son could give his father. He'd given me proof that I mattered. That I'd built something worth keeping. And that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. 10 years after Darren's death, the Hale Foundation had served over 400 boys. Some became carpenters. Others became engineers, teachers, mechanics. But all of them learned the same lesson. You can build a life worth living, even when you start with nothing. I was 82 years old now, moving slower but still showing up every day. The workshop had become my church, the kids my congregation, and every project we completed was a prayer for better futures. One Tuesday morning, a 17-year-old named Deshaun approached me. He'd been with us for 3 years, one of the quietest kids I'd ever taught. Brilliant hands, though. Could build anything once you showed him how. Mr. Hale, he said nervously, can I ask you something? Course, son. My dad left when I was 5. Just walked out one day. Never called. Never visited. And I used to be so angry about it. He paused, his jaw working. But you've been more of a father to me than he ever was. How do I stop being angry? I set down my tools and looked at this young man who'd walked into my workshop broken and was now standing tall. You don't stop being angry all at once, I told him honestly. Anger is grief wearing different clothes. You grieve the father you should have had, the childhood you deserved. That's okay. That's human. So how do you move past it? You build something new, I said. My son taught me that. When life breaks you, you gather up the pieces and build something different. Maybe something even better. Deshaun nodded slowly, processing. Your father's absence taught you what kind of man not to be, I continued. Now you get to decide what kind of man you want to become. That's power, son. That's freedom. His eyes watered. Will you come to my graduation? From high school, I mean. My mom will be there, but I'd like you to be there too. My throat tightened. I'd be honored. 3 months later, I sat in a high school auditorium watching Deshaun walk across that stage. Straight A's. Full scholarship to trade school. A future built from broken pieces. When he got his diploma, he looked right at me and mouthed, "Thank you." I cried like a baby. In a room full of strangers. And I didn't care who saw. The years rolled on. My hands shook more. My hearing got worse. I hired a younger man, David, to take over most of the teaching. But I still showed up, still sat with the kids, still listened when they needed someone to care. One afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Weston, now retired himself. "Gordon, I'm going through old files. Found something of Darren's you should have." He brought it by that evening. A journal. Leather-bound, worn at the edges. Darren's handwriting filled every page. "He kept this in my office safe," Mr. Weston explained. "Asked me to give it to you 10 years after his death. Said you'd need it then." 10 years. Exactly. That night, I sat in my workshop with the journal on my lap, almost afraid to open it. But I did. The first entry was dated 2 weeks before the accident. "Dad doesn't know this, but I've been coming to the workshop at night. Just sitting there. Remembering what it felt like to build things with him. Simpler times. Better times." I turned the page with shaking hands. Entry after entry documented his struggles with and his regrets about the life he'd chosen, his love for me. But it also held something else. Hope. "I'm going to change things," he'd written a week before he died. "I'm going to leave and move back to Richmond. Take over the workshop like we always planned. Life's too short to live for someone else's approval." My vision blurred with tears. He'd been coming home. He'd been coming back to me. "I'll tell Dad tomorrow." The final entry read, "I'll tell him I'm sorry for getting lost. That I'm ready to build something that matters. Together." Tomorrow never came. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest, sobbing in the empty workshop. He'd been coming home. After all those years, after all that distance, my boy was coming back. But fate had other plans. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Hours, maybe. Until my tears ran dry and all that was left was a hollow ache and a strange kind of peace. He'd wanted to come home. That knowledge changed everything. All those years I'd thought I'd lost him to Anne's world, he'd been fighting his way back to me. He'd just run out of time. The next morning, I added a new photo to the wall at the foundation. Darren and me in the workshop, him about 16, both of us covered in sawdust and grinning like fools. Underneath, I hung a small plaque with a quote from his journal. "Life's too short to live for someone else's approval. Build something that matters." The kids asked about it. I told them about my son. About how he'd taught me that love isn't measured in years or blood or biology. It's measured in showing up. In choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard. Marcus, now 25 and working as a contractor, brought his own son to the workshop one Saturday. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, with curious eyes and sticky fingers. "Mr. Hale," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Gordon. Named him after you. Hope that's okay." I looked at this tiny human carrying my name, and something in my heart that had been broken for 10 years suddenly felt whole. "That's more than okay, son. That's an honor." Little Gordon picked up a piece of scrap wood, turning it over in his small hands. "What's this for?" he asked. "Whatever you want to build," I told him, kneeling down with difficulty. That's the beautiful thing about wood. It starts as nothing. Then someone with vision and patience turns it into something that lasts. Like magic. Like love, I corrected gently. Like love. I taught him how to sand that day, his small hands under mine, Marcus watching with tears in his eyes. 3 generations in one workshop. A legacy building itself. That evening, I drove to the cemetery one last time. My body was failing. I could feel it. The doctors had said maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Cancer. Same kind that took Marianne. I wasn't afraid. I sat by Darren's grave in my folding chair, watching the sunset paint the sky. I read your journal, son, I said aloud. I know you were coming home. And I want you to know something. You did come home. Through that will. Through the foundation. Through every boy who learned that fatherhood isn't about DNA. A breeze rustled through the trees. I'm tired, Darren. Real tired. But I'm not sad. I got to be your father. I got to watch you grow into a man who changed the world just by being kind. And then I got 10 more years to finish what we started together. I pulled out the letter he'd written me, now creased and worn from being read 1,000 times. You said love keeps building, even after someone's gone. You were right, son. We built something that'll outlast both of us. Something that matters. I stood slowly, my old bones protesting one last time. I'll see you soon, boy. Save me a spot in the workshop. 6 months later, I passed away quietly in my sleep. The foundation held a memorial service. Over 300 people showed up. Former students, volunteers, families whose lives had been changed by what Darren's final gift had created. Deshawn spoke at the service, now a successful contractor with his own business. Mr. Hale taught me that broken things can be fixed, he said, his voice steady. That you can build a future from scraps. He showed up for hundreds of boys who needed someone to believe in them. He was the father we all wished we'd had. Marcus spoke next, his son Gordon sitting quietly in the front row. He saved my life, Marcus said simply. Not with money or pity. With time. With patience. With the belief that I was worth saving. That's what real fathers do. The foundation continues to this day. David runs it now, along with a board of former students who never forgot what they learned in that workshop. They've expanded to 6 locations across Virginia. Thousands of boys have learned that fatherhood isn't about blood. It's about showing up, building something that lasts, choosing love even when it's hard. And attended my funeral. She stood in the back, quiet and respectful. After the service, she placed a single white rose on my casket. Thank you for teaching me what real love looks like, she whispered. Even though I didn't deserve the lesson. She walked away slowly, an older woman who'd learned her lessons the hard way. But she'd learned them. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for. They buried me next to Darren. Same simple granite headstone. Gordon Michael Hale. Beloved father. Builder of good things. On the day of my burial, 37 boys from the foundation showed up in matching shirts. They'd made them specially. Each shirt had the same quote from Darren's journal. Build something that matters. They stood around my grave, these boys I'd taught, these sons I'd chosen, and they sang. Nothing fancy. Just amazing grace, sung badly and beautifully by voices cracking with grief and gratitude. And if you believe in such things, maybe Darren and I were watching from somewhere beyond. Maybe we were finally back in the workshop together, building something eternal. Because that's what love does. It outlasts death. It transforms tragedy into purpose. It turns broken hearts into foundations strong enough to hold up generations. My son taught me that. Not through his life, but through his death. through a will that proved blood doesn't make a father, through a legacy that continues to build futures for boys who need someone to show up. In the end, revenge wasn't about destroying Anne. It wasn't about the money or the house or the public humiliation. Real revenge was living well, building something beautiful from grief, proving that love, real love, can't be killed by death or lies or time. That's the truth I learned at 72 in a lawyer's office, surrounded by documents and DNA tests and a daughter-in-law's cruelty. Sometimes the strongest walls are built from broken hearts. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's proof that you mattered, that you built something worth keeping, that your love created ripples that will spread long after you're gone. My name was Gordon Hale. I was a carpenter from Richmond, Virginia, and I was a father, not because of DNA, but because I showed up every single day, until the very end, and that, more than anything else, is what real fatherhood looks like. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever been underestimated, if you know what it means to build something from broken pieces, then you're part of this family. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what real fatherhood means to you, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story about truth, justice, and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they matter, that their love counts, that showing up is the greatest gift you can give. Turn on notifications because we have more stories coming that will inspire you, challenge you, and remind you that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to build something beautiful. What did Gordon teach you today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Until next time, remember, the strongest foundations are built from the bravest hearts. Keep building, keep showing up, keep loving, because that's what real fathers do.